And welcome, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Mm.
So we are into Torah Tmima and moving slowly along with Abraham's journeys at the beginning of his saga. And just looking at the lessons we learned, found that the rabbinic tradition learns from these narratives. So, Vayelech Lemsa'av. So this is on his return from Egypt. He went down from Canaan to Egypt because, of course, there was a famine in the land of Canaan at the time, and there was provender in the land of Egypt. We read about what happened there with Sarah and Pharaoh. And he is on his return back to the land of Canaan. It says he went according to his journeys. He followed his journeys. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, said Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav. Minayin, where do we derive? In other words, where in scripture do we derive shelo yishane adav me'achsaniya shelo, that a person shouldn't change his lodging places. In other words, if you journey, you should use the same motel, the same hotels that you did on your way. You should use the same hotels coming back, and that basically the thought that's occurred to me when I've come across this statement is that it provides some stability to people whose income depends on things that are circumstantial, and that trying to help people with to stabilize their income is something that's a very good thing, and it's a way in which one can personally do that. So, using the same place is a mitzvah in the sense of it's a good deed. I don't think Rav is trying to give us a halachic ruling here, but saying what would be called a midat of a good quality. But how do we know this? Shinemar, we base it on statements in scripture, right? So there's the statement. Ad hamakom asher haya sham uhalo b'tchila. So there's a statement in the text that says that we can look at the whole verse, right? Here we go. Let's find it here. I'm looking to see. It's verse 3 says, right, Vayelech Lamasa'av. He followed his journeys, Negev ad Beit El, from the Negev, from the south to Bethel. And here we go, Ad Hamakom Asher Hayasham Ohalo, to the place where his tent was. It's going to be Batchila, right? Originally. So that's what he's saying here, right? Because it says to the place where his tent was originally. And the fact that it says, his tent was originally is putting an emphasis, it seems to me, on the originally. So that's why we know you don't change it. You go back to your original lodging place. But there's a disagreement here. So this is what Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav. But Rabbi Yossi Berebi Chanina Omer, but there's a difference of opinion. Rabbi Yossi Berebi Chanina says he learns the same lesson, but he uses a different part of the verse. He says, "V'dichtiv vayelech lemasa'av." It says he went according to his journeys. What do we mean his journeys, right? So we'll see, but it means he was following the same journey that he had originally, and we'll take a look at Torah Mima for a deeper understanding of this. My Beinahu, is there some inference that is different? Does one have a different inference than the other? And what is the difference? The difference is achsanya de akrai ikabenayu. The difference between them has to do with an incidental place to spend the night. In other words, in a case where you you have circumstances are such that you have to bed down for the night and you're not at the lodging place that you were originally, you can stop at that lodging place. It's okay. Whereas in the other case, it might be more specific and saying, no, you have to stay, you must stay, and you must plan your trip in such a way that you will stay at those original lodging places. Let's take a look, and I will hope that Torah Tamima will explain this better than I just did. All right. So, Piresh Rashi. So Rashi explains, and would be in the Talmud here in Arachin, page 16b. Rashi explains, Laman de Amar, right? According to the one who uses the verse Hayasham Ohalo Batchila, where his tent was originally, Mashma, that is the verse, that's the one that implies Achsania de Kavua, right? That the established lodging place. Aval achasania to akrai, but an incidental lodging place, kagon, and he now gives the example of what might be an incidental lodging place, kagon shenikre lo b'masa'o, something that just happens. It happens in the course of his journey. Kagon, and he gives an example. This is Rashi, right? I believe we are quoting him the whole way, all the way to here. For example, sheshak'a alav chama, right? So, for example, he was traveling and the sun set in the midst of his journey. He had not reached that original lodging place. The sun had set, but there was a lodging place that he could reach quite easily. Mutar l'shanot. It's okay if he uses a different l'shanot to use a different place. It's okay. So that's in the case that where it says, let's just make sure we've got the one that Rashi is saying he is using, right? He says, Asher Hayasham Ohalo B'Tchila, where his tent was originally. That's the verse that allows you to change it if necessary. Ulaman de Amar, and the opinion, the one who holds min vayelech lamasa'av, he went according to his journeys. Afilu achsania de akrai ein lishanot. He says, even in a case where you might need a incidental, right, lodging place, you cannot change. You have to go to that original place. Ad kan lishano. That's the end of the quote from Rashi. So. He says, I don't feel this is sufficiently explained, that this explanation of Rashi doesn't go the distance that it needs to. There's still elements that are, he says, that are difficult to understand, that aren't fully explained by Rashi. Ki'im, because be'emit b'mashma'ut halashon, because if in fact in the implication of the language, right, the vayelech lemasa'av, right, that where he went according to his journeys, afilu achsania de akrai, that if that statement he followed, he went according to his journeys, that means that even incidental lodging places are not, he cannot change it, right? He couldn't change it. Imkain, if this is the case, my tama, what is the logic, demanda amar, of the one who says, de los varalechein, right? That the one who says that he doesn't agree with us, right? Acharei, since the meforash kativ, right? Vayelech lemasa'av, since it says explicitly that he went according to his journeys, right? V'gam bechlal eino, and in general, eino mevuar. It's not clear. Efu b'mashma b'lashon v'alelech l'masab. Exactly where in the expression he followed his journeys. Afilu achsania de akrai. That it included, right? That he did not follow. When it says he followed his journeys, it meant it did not follow incidental lodging places. Okay, it's not so clear. Okay, aval lulei perusho, were it not for the respect he has for Rashi's interpretation, hava amena, I might have thought, deman de yalif min vayelech lemasa'av, right? That the one who actually uses the verse, he followed his journeys, right? He's saying, remember, Rashi said that verse that says he followed his journeys means you must follow exactly that journey. That's how he seems to be understanding it, and not any other. He can't change it, right? Samech, he is holding on to al hadrasha, that interpretation, the ita b'midrash Rabbah, that we find in the Midrash Rabbah, kan, in this verse, Parsha Mem He, in chapter 41 of Midrash Rabbah, Genesis Rabbah, that deals with this particular chapter. There is an interpretation there, Vayelech Lemesa'av, where it says he followed his journey, b'masaot shalach bahen chazar. This is why he interprets it this way, that it isn't, he didn't change any of his lodging places, because in Genesis Rabbah it says it interprets it as, this verse as saying, in the journeys that he had gone on them, he returned. In other words, he went back and followed exactly the journey he'd come out with, he returned with. The Tam Hadrasha, and the logic behind this interpretation, to medayek, that he is focusing on echem shelo, right? That they were his journeys, right? The fact that they were his particular travel plans, you might say, right? V'darash, and so he interprets al shekvar halach bahem benas'o Mitzrayim. In other words, it was his itinerary. He followed exactly his itinerary on the way back, because it says his itinerary. Ulefize, and according to this, mevoar. Now it becomes clear. Shetzimtzem lachanot, that he was confined. That's the word tzimtzem, to confine, right? But let's say that he was particular. He was meticulous. Lachanot b'chol makom makom, in each and every place. Shekvar halach bahem, which he had already journeyed, because it says when he returned, he went on his journey, on his itinerary. Umiva'ar, and now it becomes clear, afilu achsania de akrai, that that an incidental lodging place would not be included. Uman de lo yalif min vayelech lemesa'av, but the one who does not derive this principle from the verse that says vayelech lemesa'av, he went according to his journey, lo medayekan. So because it doesn't say his journeys, right? He isn't as particular about it. Usvarale, right? And he holds, the one who interprets it from the other verse where he had originally pitched his tent, Dehu me'ein halashon, that it is an expression, it's a kind of expression, Ele Masa'e b'nei Israel, where it says these are the journeys. In other words, he doesn't think that verse that says he went according to his journeys means his particular itinerary. It just means his journeys, in the same way where it talks about these are the journeys of the children of Israel, right, in Parshat Mas'eh. V'yein b'midrash Rabbah kan, and take a look at the Midrash Rabbah here, Sof Perek Mem, at the end of chapter 40 of Midrash Rabbah, what it says in that particular case. In other words, he doesn't say, when it says Masa'av, right, or Mas'e b'nei Israel, these are the journeys of the children of Israel. In that context, it simply means this was their itinerary, not this was their itinerary, and that they had to follow exactly that in that sense. But it's simply talking about the various encampments they had, but without the emphasis that is placed here in this particular context. I know this is a little convoluted, but I hope the explanation was sufficient. Onwards. Next verse, V'gam Lot, and also Lot. Let's take a look at the actual verse. Let's find it here. V'gam Lot, and to Lot too, ha'olech et Abraham, who was going with Abram, who was journeying with Abram, hayatzon uvakar v'olam. He also had sheep and cattle and tents. In other words, he had lots of possessions as well, right? We know that Abraham was given gifts by Pharaoh to a point which made him rich, and now we're mentioning that Lot too was quite wealthy. He was a wealthy person. So, Begam Lot Vegomer, etc. And Lot too. Amar le Rava le Rabba. So Rava, he is an Amora. He is a teacher of the rabbi mentioned in the Gemara after the Mishnah. Rabba is a different Amora. Notice the slight difference in spelling. This is pronounced Rava. This is pronounced Rabba. Bar Mari, Rabba Bar Mari. He said to Rabba Bar Mari. I believe there is a Rabba, but it's not just without any additional appellation, and it's a different Rabbah than Rabbah Bar Mari. So Rava said to Rabbah Bar Mari, Mana, from where? Hani Mile, where do we derive that the proverb that literally means these words to Amri Inchi? In other words, this popular expression. From where do we derive the popular expression, Batar Mare Nichse, following a man of possession, someone who's very wealthy? Tzivi Mashoch, there are always rakings, there are always twigs with somebody. In other words, there's always some stuff left over from someone who is very, very wealthy. Amarle, he said to him, that is, Rabba Bar Mari said to him, to Rava, Dichtev, we know it from a passage that says, V'gam lelot haolech et Avram, and to Lot who journeyed with Abram. And I think Torah Tamim is going to tell us, well, this little parenthetical statement, who journeyed with Abram. Do we really need it? Don't we know already that Abram took Lot with him on his journey? So what's the strength? In other words, what is this parenthetical statement trying to tell us, or phrase? Hayatzon uvakar, that he also had sheep, flocks, and cattle, bohalim, and tents. That's where we get it. So let's find out. I think there was let's see here. Right. Tzivi, we've got a footnote here. Tzivi Mashoch, right? Follows Tzivi. Tzivi, so he has a different, he explains Tzivi as something else. He said, Tzivi he ze'ash meina, right? He says that Tzivi, this word Tzivi means fat, means like fat drippings. All right, so that, and he goes on to explain, and he says you can find this expression in Chulin, or this of Tzivi, page 124 on the A side, Hanogea betziv hayotze mimeni, which has to do with this oozing that comes out of him. And what he's trying to say, what this expression means, hanogea b'mashuach b'shemen, that someone who touches someone who is anointed with oil, b'shemen, b'shuach b'shemen, somebody who's anointed with oil, ne'esa mashuach kamhu, he also becomes anointed. In other words, it rubs off on him. The oil that's on the person who is anointed rubs off on him too. That's the sort of literal understanding of what's going on here. So going on. Mashal who, right? So he says Mashal, it's a proverb, right? Or a parable to Lot, lelot. So this little proverb applies to Lot. Shahaya Eitzel Abraham, because he was with Abram, right? He was going along, journeying with Abraham. Shahaya Ashir, that he was wealthy. Amit Asher Gamhu. So Lot, since Abram was wealthy, he too became wealthy. For Alzir Merabez, and regarding this, Halashon, in other words, implies or suggests, V'gam lelot haolech et Avraham. There we know. So now we know that the fact that the verse itself says that it mentions explicitly that Lot was going with Abram. It just mentioned how he too was wealthy. We just read how Abram was wealthy. And now we say the fact that Lot went with Abram and he was wealthy too, right? Haya, etc. He had these possessions. Asher lechoora, because on first impression, halashon halech et Avraham miyutar. It seems like that, as I mentioned, that little parenthetical phrase is unnecessary. It seems redundant. The hakvar yadanu shalachimo, because we already know that Lot went with Abram. So what's this verse coming to tell us? And we just found out. We found out that what the Torah is telling us is that Lot's association with Abram, it also had implications on Lot in this particular way too. So, and this is where we will leave it for today. And I'll just put the place here. Okay. Give me one moment while I take this here. All right. And I'm going to stop the share. Any thoughts before we go off the record? Okay.